The warm summer rain slicked the sidewalk outside the Lucent Grand Hotel, a towering monument of marble and glass rising like a citadel of privilege in the heart of Manhattan. A fleet of black SUVs idled curbside, engines purring, windshield wipers brushing away droplets like clockwork. Inside the hotel's grand revolving doors, the atmosphere was perfumed with exclusivity, white-gloved bellhops, champagne-colored walls, crystal chandeliers that shimmered above the heads of executives, diplomats, and trust fund heirs. A man stepped from the rain and into this world like he belonged there, 6'3", broad-shouldered, wrapped in a charcoal wool coat. He carried himself with a quiet, effortless power, the kind that made people turn their heads without understanding why. His name was Langston Royce. Langston didn't need to announce who he was, not to the doorman who held the doors open, not to the front desk that had confirmed his penthouse suite hours ago, and certainly not to the hotel manager who had shaken his hand just a month earlier at a Forbes gala. But sometimes, power dressed in dark skin was mistaken for threat. Sometimes, even a $900 haircut and a Rolex peeking from the cuff of a Tom Ford suit weren't enough to dismantle assumptions. As he approached the marble check-in counter, he offered a polite nod to the concierge, a young woman with a clipboard and a tight bun, who did a double take, her lips pressed into a neutral line. "Good afternoon," Langston said, placing his phone on the counter. "Langston Royce. I have the presidential suite reserved for the next 3 nights." The concierge's eyes flicked over him again, the subtle widening of pupils, the glance at security, a flicker of hesitation. It was a look Langston knew too well. He saw it in boardrooms, at country clubs, in first-class lounges. It was a look of someone calculating whether they should speak to you with respect or suspicion. "Excuse me, sir," she said, tapping rapidly at her keyboard. I'm not seeing a reservation under that name." Langston smiled gently, reached into the inner pocket of his coat, and produced a confirmation email, holding it up. "Here you go. Reserved through Black Monarch Holdings. It's my company." She leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. Then something shifted. Her jaw tightened. She leaned over and whispered something to a nearby man in a dark blazer, the assistant manager, judging by his badge. He stepped forward, all surface-level civility and veiled condescension. "Sir," he said, folding his arms, "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. We're currently unable to verify your booking, and this space is for guests only." Langston's brows rose, barely perceptible. "Are you implying I'm not a guest?" "I'm implying," the man said smoothly, "that until we confirm your identity and reservation, you cannot remain in this area." Other guests turned to look. Murmurs bubbled in the background. A woman in pearls clutched her handbag tighter. A valet hovered near the door, watching the scene with thinly disguised curiosity. Langston stood still, hands in plain sight, expression unreadable. He knew the playbook. He'd read it too many times. A single raised voice, a single wrong word, and suddenly he'd be the one escorted out under the glow of smartphone cameras. "I suggest you check again," he said, voice cool and composed. "Or better yet, call your general manager." The assistant manager didn't budge. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Step away from the counter, or we'll have to involve security." The words hung in the air like smoke. Langston's phone vibrated. He glanced down, a call from his executive assistant. "Mel." He picked it up. "Langston." Her voice came through. "Everything okay? The hotel just charged the suite to your card, so I assume you checked in." He looked up, locking eyes with the assistant manager. "Not yet," he said, deliberately, "but that's about to change." The manager reached for his radio. Langston watched, breathing slow, and then security appeared, 2 men in navy uniforms, flanking him on either side. The room quieted. "Sir," one of them said, "please come with us." He didn't resist, not even when a guest started filming on their phone. Not even when they led him through the lobby like a criminal, past curious stares and whispering mouths. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the humiliation was just beginning. The doorman gave him a half-apologetic glance as he stepped back onto the sidewalk. The SUVs were still there. His driver, James, leaned against the hood, chewing gum. Langston's coat flapped slightly in the wind as he approached the vehicle. He paused. standing in front of the hotel, staring up at its shimmering glass like it was a lie he'd finally seen through. He opened the door and slid into the back seat. James glanced in the rear view. "Everything good, boss." Langston's fingers tapped once against his knee. "Not yet," he said. "Take me around the block." Slowly. James nodded and eased the SUV into motion. They drifted away from the curb, disappearing into the slow river of traffic. Langston took out his phone and dialed. "Mel," he said when she answered. "Call the board. Now. Now. But. And pull the ownership record for the Langston Grand. I want full asset data, executive contacts, and regional management chains. Every name, every department, every subcontractor. If our holdings in Monarch Hospitality still include this property, I want to know exactly how much of it I own." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You still own 51%, Langston. Your majority. Then we've got work to do." The SUV glided past the hotel again. Langston stared out the tinted glass as he loosened his tie. "Take me back," he said. James raised an eyebrow, but turned the wheel. Exactly 21 minutes after he'd been escorted out like an imposter, Langston Royce stepped through the revolving doors of the Langston Grand with different energy, the kind that precedes storms. Behind him, two more black SUVs pulled up and four individuals exited in tailored suits, clipboards in hand. The assistant manager spotted him first and went pale. Langston didn't stop at the counter. He walked right past, directly to the internal access hallway behind the concierge, where only staff were allowed. A junior clerk reached out in protest. Langston didn't even glance at him. One of the suited individuals flashed a corporate ID. Emergency audit. Internal authority granted by Monarch Holdings. The staff stepped aside like curtains parting before royalty. The hotel manager, a wiry man named Kenneth Marlowe, came jogging down the hall seconds later, flushed and confused. "I wasn't told, Mr. Royce." Langston turned. Slowly. "I believe I requested the presidential suite." Marlowe blinked. "There must have been some miscommunication. If you give me 5 minutes." Langston nodded toward the assistant manager, who had arrived, breathless. "Was this the one who had me removed?" Marlowe hesitated. Langston didn't wait. "You're fired," he said, looking the man in the eye. The words hit like thunder. "WH, what?" "Effective immediately. Collect your belongings." "But I—" Langston turned to the cluster of suits behind him. "Staff review. Entire department. I want names, backgrounds, and customer interactions flagged for potential bias. HR grievances. Terminate any employee with a record of discrimination." A silence spread through the hallway like a virus. Staff whispered. Phones buzzed. And then the tide shifted. He stood still as the words echoed down the hallway, the weight of them undeniable. No one moved. Even the air seemed to pause, as if the building itself understood that something powerful had shifted. Langston didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every syllable fell with the precision of a gavel, and every pair of eyes in the corridor was fixed on him. Some wide with fear, others with awe. The assistant manager stammered for breath, his face growing red, then pale, then red again. "Why you can't do this? You don't have the authority." Langston's expression didn't change. "Security," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Escort him out." One of the suited individuals stepped forward. Not hotel security. No. This was one of Langston's corporate enforcers, an HR specialist flown in from the Monarch Holdings executive compliance team. She was tall, sharply dressed, and carried a leather folder under her arm like it was a sword. "I'm Dana Carter, executive compliance. You're being placed on administrative leave pending formal termination. Your badge access has been revoked. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your listed address. Do you need someone to collect your belongings from your locker?" The assistant manager said nothing. He looked at Langston, at Dana, then back toward the lobby where guests were now peeking curiously toward the hallway. Word was spreading. The man turned and walked, quickly, stiffly, out of view, as if retreating could undo the damage. Langston exhaled slowly. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Something colder. Something necessary. He stepped past the shaken employees and entered the employee operations room, a drab office lit with buzzing fluorescents and scattered with clipboards and outdated desktop monitors. A middle-aged woman in a navy blouse stood up quickly when she saw him. Her nameplate read, June, front desk supervisor. Mr. Royce, she said, voice trembling. Langston nodded at her, not unkindly. Don't be nervous, June. Sit. She sank back into her chair. He leaned on the corner of her desk, arms crossed. How long have you worked here? 19 years, she said quietly, since the hotel opened. Then you know the culture here. She glanced down. Yes, so. And you know who gets followed, who gets doubted, who gets offered champagne on arrival, and who gets asked to wait outside. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Yes, so. I need names. I need truth. I'm not cleaning up a public relations mess. I'm tearing out the rut. And if you help me do it, you'll keep your job. If you don't, I'll assume you were part of it. June swallowed hard. You're not going to find just a few bad apples. I know, Langston said, standing straight. I'm looking for the orchard. And then he moved, like a conductor among instruments. He stepped through the hallways, each footfall gathering momentum. Staff parted before him like water around a prow. Behind him, his audit team fanned out. Dana at the lead, followed by a stern-faced man named Michael, an ex-military logistics coordinator who now specialized in rooting out toxic management structures. They began the process floor by floor. Langston visited every department: laundry, housekeeping, valet services, kitchen staff, concierge, spa. No section was too low level. He asked questions, listened, took notes. In each conversation, he saw flickers of fear, then curiosity, then something deeper. Recognition. They knew his face. Maybe not from television or the pages of Bloomberg, but they knew what he was. A black man in power. Unapologetically so. And that was rare enough to feel like a miracle. At one point, an elderly Jamaican bellhop named Bernard approached him discreetly and whispered, "About time someone cleaned house. Boss, this place been rotten too long." Langston nodded, patted the man on the shoulder, and moved on. By the time he reached the executive suite level, where the real decisions happened, the temperature had changed entirely. The general manager, Kenneth Marlowe, stood waiting near the elevators, clearly trying to steady himself. "Mr. Royce, I assure you, you're suspended." "But Indefinitely," Langston said, "pending internal review. Your failure wasn't procedural. It was moral. You watched it happen. You let it grow under your leadership." Marlowe's jaw tensed. "I've run this property profitably for 11 years. That should count for something." "It does," Langston said. "It counts as 11 years of silence." Two guards stepped up, flanking Marlowe. He looked like he wanted to protest again, but the words never came. He turned and left, his gait stiff, pride dragging behind him like a broken suitcase. Langston finally entered the presidential suite, the very room he had reserved, untouched, waiting behind a locked door that was once closed to him. The curtains were drawn wide, the skyline of Manhattan stretching like a kingdom outside. He walked to the window, placed a hand on the glass, and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Behind him, Dana entered, holding a tablet. "We've terminated or suspended 32 staff members," she said. "Another 11 are under review. We've flagged over 140 internal complaint forms that were never processed by HR. And we uncovered a shadow policy. Certain guests of concern were being profiled based on last names and perceived economic background." Langston didn't flinch. "And the board?" "Already in session," she said. "Your decision holds. As of this hour, you declared emergency oversight authority for the property under your majority rights. No one's pushing back, not after what just happened." He nodded slowly. "We're keeping Bernard." Dana smiled faintly. "Of course." Langston turned back to the window. He remembered being 15, standing in a parking lot with his mother after she had been turned away from a restaurant. He remembered the way she smiled even after being insulted. How she said, "One day, you'll walk into places like this, and they'll know your name before you speak it. He had learned to make his way into those rooms, but today he claimed them. The buzz of his phone broke the silence. It was Mel again. "They've gone viral," she said. Footage of the removal. The assistant manager being escorted out. Hashtag trending. Hash fired by the CEO. Langston sighed. "And press." BuzzFeed want to quote. New York Times. 2. Do you want to make a statement? He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Tell them I didn't fire them for being racist. I fired them for being comfortable with it." Another pause. "And tell Bernard is getting a raise." The sun was starting to set now, casting amber light across the skyscrapers. Langston stood at the window like a shadow cast by something far larger. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. The suite grew quieter as the last rays of sun began to bleed away, the city below humming like a restless organism. Langston stood in the center of it all, backlit by the skyline, a man who had just rewritten the rules inside a building designed to exclude him. Yet, for all the power he held in that moment, there was no smile, no victory dance, just silence. And beneath that, a long, slow burn of memory that refused to let him rest. He turned away from the window and walked toward the sleek bar, poured 2 fingers of Glenfiddich 30, and let the liquor settle in the crystal glass. He didn't drink it. He stared at it. A knock came at the suite door, soft, respectful. Dana stepped inside. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's personal." "Who?" "Her name is Ava Brooks. Says she knew your mother." Langston blinked. That name. He hadn't heard it in almost a decade. "Send her in," he said quietly. The door opened wider, and a woman in her late 50s stepped in. She was dressed plainly, gray cardigan, pressed jeans, low heels, but she carried herself with grace. Her face had aged, but her eyes hadn't changed. They were fierce and kind, the kind of eyes that had seen struggle and still chosen empathy. "Langston," she said softly. He nodded, trying to keep his composure. "Ava, it's been a long time." "I heard what happened," she said. "Someone showed me the clip. You looked just like your mother in that moment. Not how you spoke, but how you stood, like the ground beneath you belonged to you." Langston didn't answer right away. He gestured to a chair. Ava sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I was there the night your mother got turned away," she said. "Same restaurant. You were a boy then, but you stood between her and that manager like a guard dog. I never forgot that." Langston finally took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, slow and smooth. "She taught me to be patient," he said. "Taught me to survive in places I wasn't welcome. Taught me how to smile even when I wanted to break something. I think I forgot that patience today." Ava leaned forward. "No, you remembered who you are." They sat in silence for a moment. Just the two of them, the city whispering outside. "You didn't come all this way just to say that," Langston said eventually. "No," she admitted. "I came to ask what happens next." He looked at her. "You've made a statement," she said. "But it's not just this hotel. It's every hotel, every boardroom, every gallery and private club, and Ivy League gate. You made them listen for 1 hour. But what about tomorrow?" Langston placed the glass down. "You think I should have let it go?" "I think," she said carefully, "that if you don't have a plan bigger than vengeance, the system will swallow this moment and digest it like it never happened." He stood and walked toward the balcony, opened the doors. The warm night air rolled in. "I don't want vengeance," he said finally. "I want infrastructure." She rose too, came to stand beside him. "I want an equity division," he said, staring out at the city. "I want the top 10 properties we own, including this one, to submit to monthly civil rights audits. I want an anonymous reporting system overseen by third-party watchdogs. I want frontline staff given tuition benefits and management training tracks. I want more Bernards in charge. More women like you in rooms they've never entered." Ava looked at him with something like pride. "And I want every hospitality student at HBCUs and underserved communities to know that they don't have to enter through the back door just to change a linen sheet. They can run the building." He paused. "I'm going to start with this hotel," he said. And then I'm going to make every hotel on this block afraid of becoming the next loose end grand. To his right, Ava smiled. Not a warm, maternal smile. A sharp one. Then I'll help, she said. I have people, and I still believe. That night, Langston didn't sleep. He drafted internal memos, composed speeches, scheduled meetings with reporters he usually ignored. He opened old files from the Monarch Holdings archive, proposals rejected for being too activist, resumes passed over without real cause, emails where partners expressed concern about optics. And he called Bernard. Sir, the bellhop answered, clearly nervous. You've been promoted, Langston said. Front of house liaison. I don't even know what that means, Bernard said. It means the front desk will now reflect the values we claim to hold. It means I need your honesty, your discipline, and your memory. Bernard was quiet. Then, I'll make you proud. You already have. In the days that followed, the news exploded. Black CEO remove hotel staff after racial incident. Langston Royce enforces mass firings in luxury hotel shakeup. Who really owns a loose and grand? A look behind the glass doors. Fox News called it reverse discrimination. MSNBC called it a reckoning long overdue. Black Twitter called it justice. And the public, they couldn't stop watching the video. Millions of views. Dozens of think pieces. But the heat didn't just come from the public. Monarch Holdings minority board members called for an emergency session. Some investors were concerned about brand perception. Others warned of lawsuits. Langston walked into that boardroom alone, wearing the same charcoal suit he had been wearing the day it all started. He didn't flinch. I didn't do this to start a war, he told the board. I did it because we're already in one, and I refuse to pretend we're not. Some of them squirmed. Others folded their arms. But none could deny the numbers. Online bookings were up. Social media engagement had tripled. A younger, more diverse customer base was emerging. He continued, I know some of you think this is about one man being thrown out of a hotel. But it's not. It's about how many years we've ignored the people in the uniforms. How many times we let microaggressions slide because the customer paid in gold. That ends now. Oh, I walk. There was silence. A few stared down at their tablets. One cleared his throat. Langston waited. And then a slow clap from the end of the table. It was Alice Wren, the oldest board member, who had been silent through the entire meeting. Chinese American, sharp as a knife, and richer than half the table combined. She looked up, folded her hands. I've waited 20 years to hear someone say that in this room, she said. Let's build. Langston walked out of that meeting with not just authority, but allies. The Loose and Grand reopened under a new slogan, hospitality without prejudice. A month later, Bernard gave the opening speech for the new employee orientation program. Standing proud in a tailored blazer, his accent thick with Caribbean heat, his voice shaking just a little. Langston sat in the back row, arms folded, eyes shining. And somewhere, in a memory just out of reach, he could hear his mother's voice. You walk into those places like they belong to you, because one day they will. He was no longer that boy. He was a man who'd made it true. But even now, he knew the fight wasn't over.